Is that a microphone?
Quite the observation there, dum-dum.
What's a microphone?
The real question, Bachelor, is why is there a microphone here on Ordinal in the middle of a field?
Well, Jim, typically one uses a microphone to record things.
On Earth, you do that, Shard. We are in the middle of a field. There shouldn't be a microphone here.
Maybe Puma's put it here.
Puma check!
Sector 4, clear.
Sector 2, clear.
All sectors clear, but keep an eye open.
They could be anywhere. That microphone could be a Puma trap.
Can I eat it?
It's made of metal, Bachelor.
The question stands.
You'd trust a potential Puma trap. It could give you a tummy ache.
I doubt that.
Why is a microphone here? What purpose could one possibly serve here as we march off to fight the Dark Overlord?
In Book 8.
What?
I mean, as we march off in our adventures. The adventures of Shart and Dum-Dum.
If we are having adventures, I'm pretty sure you aren't the main character.
If not the illustrious Shart, then whom?
Probably Badgerlore. He is a wily old badger.
That's Jim. He is the mayor of Noobtown, after all.
Fated to save the world from the Dark Overlord.
Oh, yeah. What was I thinking?
That kidnapping people from Earth is acceptable.
You were crushed by a truck. I thought that it is customary for Earthlings that are crushed by trucks to be summoned to another world.
That's just on one island out in the Pacific.
Sounds dangerous.
Well, it is always another bad day for Tokyo Tower.
Is that a card on the microphone? What does it say?
Long-winded one.
Yes.
No, the card's... Never mind. It says we are supposed to do an announcement for a podcast.
That is the kind of trick a Puma would say.
Puma's where?
What is a podcast?
Charles talked about that. There are these pod people who are secretly in control of everything on Earth.
I'm surprised. That's at least fairly normal. Normally, Earth is so weird.
I could use the podcast to talk to my family back on Earth.
Now it really sounds like a Puma trick.
Good point. I'm going to scout around.
Leave it to the Elder Demon. All right. Listen to the Long-Winded One podcast, featuring the author of Noobtown, Ryan Rimmel, who wrote My Wondrous Adventures, and his adorable sidekick, Johnathan McClain.
I went to Juilliard for this.
Welcome to Season 5 of the Long-Winded One podcast. Listen as we showcase original work from top Royal Road authors read by professional voice actors. Hear interviews from your favorite lit RPG and game lit authors. Lastly, listen as the Long-Winded One tries his hand at his first ever lit RPG novel, The Four Treasures.
All right. Well, welcome everybody back to another episode of The Long-Winded One. I have the pleasure of having both the author and the narrator of the Noobtown series and the Fifth Era Apocalypse series with me tonight. I'm very, very happy to welcome Ryan Rimmel and Johnathan McClain back to the podcast. Welcome, you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is great. I have been looking forward to this interview for months and months and months. So thank you for being here. The topic this season, as Johnathan knows already, is around game lit and lit RPG. I've had the pleasure of interviewing some of my favorite authors and favorite narrators. And we want to get to know you guys and sort of how you work together and what goes on behind the scenes from some of our favorite stories. So the first question I have for you is, can you tell us how you came to the world of lit RPG? And Johnathan, maybe tell us how you came to be associated with Noobtown and Ryan.
Sure. All right. Well, so back in the day, I used to drive around all over the place, and I was listening to these new books called Lit RPG books. And I listened to The Land and then a couple other ones. And I thought to myself, hey, I could do that. And I just turned 40, or I was around turning 40. And on my bucket list was write a book. And then I came to my real senses and realized that if I wrote a book and it was pretty decent, I might be able to partially pay for a Disney World vacation. So I wrote a book, and that's how I got into the world of writing lit RPG. It was terrible. And I went, oh, this is horrible. And I set it off to the side. And my wife said, hey, I thought you were writing a book. And I said, it's terrible. And she said, let me look at it. And she goes, yeah, it's terrible, but I think I can fix it. So we workshopped it, I think is the appropriate term. And she edited, and I rewrote sections of it that were bad. And then she edited it some more, and I rewrote the bad sections again. And it turned out that at the end, it was pretty good. And I let a friend of mine read it, and he said, hey, this is pretty good. You should publish this. And I did, and it went very well.
Well, so, okay, you glossed over some major details here. So what did you turn out initially? Was it anything like what we have now with Noobtown #1?
It was Noobtown #1, but very underdescribed. Let's see here. The final battle was pretty terrible. The Jim was kind of a jerk. He whined a lot too much. Yeah. Generally speaking, it was a terrible thing that no one should ever have read. So we went through it, and I just basically pounded it on it until it turned into something that was actually entertaining.
Yeah.
She said I should probably stick more jokes in it, so I kept sticking more and more jokes into it, and then it turned into that, and that worked good.
Yeah. Well, you said you kind of, again, you glossed over it getting published. Tell us more about how that came to be.
I self-published because that was back in the days you could still do that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got finished, I contacted a cover artist, and he bailed on me. And I had a date set in stone that I was going to publish by this date, and it finally rolled around, and I had no cover artist, so I used the Amazon app, and I just published it myself. And I figured, I have published a book. This is good. Now, what I didn't know at the time was I picked a week where no one else published anything, and they were people doing Lit RPG podcasts at the time, and said, hey, so here's what we got this week. It's called The Mayor of Noobtown. And it's decent, and there's nothing else out. So,
so let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. And, back in the day, that was enough. And I had a lot of people read it, and a lot of people liked it. And, it did well enough that I kicked out a second one, and that one did a lot better. And then I kicked out a third and a fourth one. But yeah, it was just a situation of timing. I had a decent book. I've gotten better since then. And it was just really well timed by pure happenstance.
Well, Johnathan, where in this timeline do you come in?
I mean, book one. Ryan, Podium, though, must have had some awareness of you, because they called me up with the offer to record the first book before well before the second one was published. So my recollection is they must have already had a deal inked with you. Is that true?
What happened was, after the first book came out, I would say within about a week, it was pretty obvious that was doing well enough that an audiobook was merited. So I started getting people calling me repeatedly. And one of those people was Victoria Gherkin from Podium. And it just so happens that I knew who, I got a whole bunch of fly-by-night people offering to record my book. And then also I got a thing from Podium Publishing, who I at least recognized. And at the time, I was more interested in having an audiobook published than anything else. And I knew they had a company, and I checked with some people, and they have a good reputation. So I said, okay, and I signed up with them. So I'd say within a week of me self-publishing Noobtown, I had them set up to publish
Wow.
the novel, or the audiobook. And then...
What year was this, Ryan?
2019, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. And then so she said that, and then we got a guy for you. His name's Johnathan McClain. He's pretty good. And I said, okay, I've never heard of him before, because I wasn't paying attention to that stuff at the time. And did you hear that I was going to have a book that was going to be turned into an audiobook? That sounds awesome.
Right.
And that's how it worked out. And I did listen to some of Johnathan's stuff, and it was very good. So I'm like, hey, score. They picked a good one for me.
Yeah, they're. I've talked about this before in a couple of other interviews. They're at the time, they have a whole casting team now. So, and I think we talked about this the last time I was here with you, Jared. Like, the Podium as a company has exploded over the last 5 years, like really exploded. Mm-hmm. When I met them, recording for them in 2016 at the request of another author who had, at that point, I had been recording audiobooks intermittently for a handful of years between my other, like 5 other careers, in entertainment. And I had recorded something for Random House that actually won Audiobook of the Year in like 2015. And so in 2016, they were just off of The Martian, which is what sort of put them on the map, really, I feel like, as a company. And there were like 4 employees. And one of their authors had heard my narration on this book that had won the Audie for Audiobook of the Year and said, I want that dude to do my book. And so they reached out to me. I did a couple of books for them. And then from there, we just had a relationship. And so 3 years later, this thing comes along. And I had sort of a casual, like, I know Will Wheaton. And so I sort of have a tangential understanding of what lit RPG is, if you consider Ready Player One a lit RPG, which in its the broadest sense, I suppose it is, right? Yeah. And so I sort of had a working relationship to it. And I've been playing video games my whole life. I know how the function of it all works. I was at the Writers Guild Awards. A friend of mine won an award, and I was part of his entourage in 2015. And I met Neil Druckmann, who did The Last of Us. And it wasn't a series yet, it was just a video game. But I had come off, I think I had just come off a year before I was on Mad Men. And I went over, and the reason it's relevant is I went over to Neil and I said, hi, I just wanted to tell you congratulations on your award tonight for video game, whatever. So I'm here with my friend who wrote The Imitation Game, who went on to win an Oscar. And I was like, and I'm here with my other friends from Mad Men that I was on. And I only tell you my resume because playing your video game is the best creative experience I've ever had. And that includes these other things that I just cited. Like, not even being, like, just playing your game. Like, it's so goddamn good. And he was like, oh, okay, cool, thanks. I got to go now. And so I had, like, I'm that dude. I was in the world. I had care. I had a care for it. The sensibility of what lit RPG is resonated for me. And the name of the head of casting at that time was this woman, Tamara Marston. She's still with the company. She's sort of a casting director emeritus, senior casting director there now. And she, I guess, was the one who was like, Johnathan McClain is the guy to do this particular brand of funny. And to your point, Ryan, I remember there was something called the Lit RPG podcast. Like, that was what it was called at that time. And similarly, they had a guy who did, I guess, the book reviews, and then they had a guy who did like a video version of the audiobook reviews. And I remember someone was like, hey, did you see this? And sent me a guy really touting your book and my performance of it when it came out. And so, not dissimilar to what Ryan was saying about timing, that was kind of the thing that swung the door open for me, being really invited into this lit RPG club as a narrator. And so, thanks to Ryan deciding to, try his hand at writing, it sort of changed the trajectory of my voice career, at least as far as the audiobook world is concerned. So this is, Ryan and I've talked about this before, but like my path to success as an audiobook narrator in this genre is inexorably linked to Noobtown.
And Disney World.
Yeah.
And
Ryan's desire to go to Disney World.
Yeah. So did you ever get to take that trip?
Oh, yeah. We went nuts. Well, basically, I told my wife, all right, well, whatever we make on the book could go to Disney World, and there was no competition, and it was halfway decent. So I did pretty well in the first book, and she spent all of it on Disney World.
That's great. So you have worked together both on the Noobtown series and the Fifth Era Apocalypse, which I actually haven't listened to yet. So I was wondering, there are probably other people out there who might not even know what Noobtown is about. So Ryan, I was going to give you the assignment of giving us like not a brief overview, but like a 10,000 foot view of Noobtown. And Johnathan, I was wondering if you would maybe do the same for Fifth Era Apocalypse.
Sure.
All right. Well, let's hear. Noobtown is pretty simple. It's a story about Jim, last name unknown, who was hit by a truck, as stated in the intro, and he finds himself on the world of Ordinal, and he's been chosen by the demons who are in control of Ordinal to save the world versus the Dark Overlord, a thing that he is not really very strongly pro doing for a large part of the first several books. And he basically just goes on adventures and tries to save the world and do the best he can. And he's met up with his two friends, who are Shart the Demon, who is the elder demon that summoned him there and had a accident and ended up going to Ordinal with Jim, something he really detests, and Badgelore, who is a war badger, and a wily old badger at that, and they have these fun adventures trying to defeat the Dark Overlord. And I find it's just a fun story about how Jim, a kind of a normal guy, accepts his role and then goes through and tries to save the world the best he can and does a pretty good job at it.
Yeah. So Johnathan, would you do the same for Fifth Era Apocalypse?
Sure, yeah, and tell me if I get anything wrong, Ryan. But Fifth Era Apocalypse is a group of it's 5 friends, right?
Yep, 5.
Yeah, 5 friends who are tabletop gamers. And Fifth Era Apocalypse is a clear nod to D&D. And on one ill-fated occasion where they all gather together to play, a roll of the die brings them into the universe of the game, and the stakes are that they have to rectify circumstances inside the universe of the game, or the real world, Earth itself, will be destroyed. Is that
no pressure there?
Yeah, exactly. No, like there's some stakes. Is that an accurate summary, Ryan?
Yep, that's accurate.
Yeah, and as opposed to Noobtown, where Jim is really the clear protagonist, Fifth Era is definitely an ensemble adventure comedy jamboree, so that each chapter is very focused on a particular character's POV as we go through the narrative. And so that's a lot of fun to get to do too, because, you know, you just have to assume the bird's eye view of that character for that chapter as we wind our way through the story.
Now, I know Noobtown is ongoing. Is Fifth Era Apocalypse an ongoing series? Right
now, book 3 I'm going to be working on book 3 next. And that's as much of a commitment to it as I have right now.
Gotcha. I'm going to skip to the question that I had about, I'm kind of writing my own story now, and this is not a plug for my story. It's more of like an empathetic question where I'm realizing that when my brain is in sort of creation mode, when I'm expecting myself to write a certain amount of words each day, it's really kind of hard for me to think about anything else. And I'm wondering, as somebody, I have 2 people here that I'm talking to who have to sort of immerse themselves in multiple worlds, right? So we just talked about 2 book series. Johnathan, sounds like, what did you say, 17 lined up through the end of the year? Probably.
17 books that I'm recording. And then and then anticipating your question, and then I've also got my own novel coming out and a screenplay that I have to write, and just 2 other things. So it's tricky.
So how do you do it? I mean, that's a simple question. How are you a functioning adult or a member of society when you have to? I mean, do you just spend time each day thinking about each of these things, and how do your wives deal with that?
I write 1 book at a time. That's it. That's the trick. I write 1 book. I think only about the 1 book that I'm writing, and then I finish that book and I go to the next book. If I tried to write 2 books at once, I would lose the thread of both stories, and they'd both be worse off for it. But that's what works for me, is just doing 1 at a time.
But even doing that, Do you find that your attention is split between real life and your pretend life, the made up life?
Somewhat. I mean, I definitely sit around a lot and think, and my wife finds that annoying on more than one occasion. But yeah, generally speaking, I'm pretty good about focusing when I'm working, and then kind of just vegging out otherwise. Like, I'll be thinking about it, but it's a subconscious thing where I'm not really super focused on it. I tend to watch a lot of media when I'm not actively concentrating on something, because I have a thing where when I'm writing a scene, I don't want to sit there and really ponder the scene too much before I get it on paper. I'll edit it afterwards, but I think you get a fresher view of everything if you go straight from the source, so to speak. But yeah, writing multiple stories, it can get confusing, and you can get everything all muddled together. The challenge is, like, if I write 2 or 3 stories at the same time, or like, back to back to back, Jim starts to sound like, one of my other characters.
Right.
Not like Krabby, but as everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Johnathan, this is probably even more a pertinent question for you, because you're in multiple people's worlds and your own stuff, right?
Yeah. You're catching me. You're catching me at a particularly fertile time where I've actually, in the last month, just had to implement a rigid structure, so that I remember to also eat and go to the gym and stuff too. So because right now with just the narration schedule, I have 3 books that I have to record at least a part of every day right now. So I commit 3 hours, 1 hour to each. So I do 3 hours of that. I get up in the morning. I try and work out right away. Then I hit the booth, and fortunately I have it in my house. So I go down and stairs, do 3 hours of recording. Then I pause. I have a snack. Then I pick up. So the movie that I'm writing is a World War II thing based on some IP that the studio owns. I've been hired to write it. So I don't have a choice. I'm on their schedule. So I got to turn in, pages and deadlines and so forth. So spend my afternoon doing that, clear my head out. And then my wife and I will have dinner. And then I tell her I love her, and I'll see her when she's asleep. I'll come kiss her head before I, pass out, and spend a few hours in the evening working on the manuscript, because similarly, the book isn't at my own time. Like, I have a publishing deal. I'm on a deadline with them. It's not at my own leisure. So none of the things that I do I'm not as fortunate as Ryan is to have had that particular success that affords me the opportunity to sort of cultivate at my own pace. I got a lot of overhead, so I've got to do all these things, and I got to pay a lot of bills. And so I say yes to everything, and then just find a way to make it happen. I will say that, to Ryan's point about trying to keep my head straight, working in multiple disciplines is actually not that hard, because each one requires a different kind. Like, writing a movie is different from writing a book is different than recording, right? Mm-hmm. The tricky part is recording 3 books back every day. I just did my session this morning, and to Ryan's point about keeping voices clear, that can get really tricky when I'm narrating, especially if I'm narrating 3 lit RPGs, and especially if I'm narrating 3 lit RPGs that have similar tropes, which happens, right? There are rules. And so remembering oh, no, it's the other guy who's kind of blase blah. This guy's really animated, you know what I mean? And then having to go back and re-record sometimes. So it sucks. It sucks. And I'm super grateful all at the same time. 2 things can be true at once. So,
yeah. I mean, what you're dealing with is a little bit different, right? So my question was about kind of how to keep your head on straight, but you have deadlines. That's a whole other layer of stress.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I don't have kids, so I got that going for me. So I can crawl up in a ball like a little baby, and no one is expecting me to be a grown up. I can actually, indulge my own tantrums. But it's hard. I try as much as possible to give myself 1 day a week off, and sometimes I just can't. But look, I've been in the entertainment business, either as an actor or as a writer, or as a producer or whatever, for almost 30 years. And God knows there have been plenty of times when I had nothing to do. So I am not complaining. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the gratitude. Honestly, that's maybe the answer to your question, is remembering that I'm fortunate to be able to do this is what keeps me from spiraling or freaking out and keeps me sort of direction focused. Ryan, how long after Noobtown, the first one, hit, did you stop working? Because you had a day job, right, at the time?
Oh, yeah. I stopped working after book 7, which was... So COVID happened, really, is what killed me. I work in telemedical robotics, which was very popular when no one wanted to be around anyone. And I was going all over the country and working a lot of hours. And book 7 came out, and I looked at my bank account, and I went, I don't need this much stress. And I was very happy because I had no stress. Then my wife got super sick. But for like a brief 6-month period, it was awesome.
Yeah. So you were I didn't realize it was that late. So you were doing the day job thing while writing those first 7 books?
Oh yeah. Wow. I had a rigorous schedule. I did 2 hours every night, no matter what. And well, the big thing about me is I tend to spend a lot of time thinking about books, and my job was remote service. So I'd get in a car and I'd drive for 8 hours to get to a location and fix something that was there and drive back. So I would listen to audiobooks both ways, and you pick up a lot of stuff.
Do you mind if I ask? You mentioned that your wife recently got sick. I think this ties into one of the questions I was going to ask. And book 8's going to come out this year, right? For Noobtown. Yep. And we were talking right before we pressed record. And just like you, my wife does a lot of editing of my own stuff. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about book 8, when it's going to come out, and tell us about your wife.
Okay. Well, let's start with the fun stuff. Book 8 was written March of last year. I was done March of last year, and my wife is just now finishing editing it. So it should be out hopefully around October. We're not 100% firm on that date, but I will have a pre-order out, and we'll get the script over to Johnathan at the same time. But I always release the ebook before I release the audiobook. So that's going to happen yet again. And then to my wife, she got very, very sick, extremely so. And there was a very real chance that she wasn't going to be with me anymore. So I dropped everything, and we took care of her for an extended period. And she ends up having, she doesn't like me to go into too much detail, but she had a genetic disorder, and there's a treatment for it, which she's on right now. Mm-hmm. And that was causing a lot of damage to her organs, which I've been told you need those. So
most of them.
Yeah, most of them. But anyway, yeah, it was causing a lot of problems for her in terms of living. And so we ended up spending about 3 months in the hospital more often than not. And by the time we got out, there was a lot of other doctor's appointments trying to figure out exactly what to do and how to treat everything. And my wife is a real trooper. She got through all of it. And we finally are at a good place where she's starting to recover. But, there was from September was when it really, she was having trouble before September of last year, but September of last year is when it all fell apart. Mm-hmm. And then I was just taking care of her until June or July of this year. So just, last month or so.
Yeah. Well, I want the listener to know that I asked Ryan's permission to ask this question before we got started. And it ties into the release of book 8, which I kind of want to say the title, but I'll let you do it, Ryan.
The title of book 8 is going to be The Mayor's War. And it's a play on the Dark Overlord and the Mayor of Windfall.
Yeah. Are you both aware that is the first time that I've heard that information?
Well, it was called, I think, the King of Windfall or King of Noobtown was my original draft title for it.
Okay.
But it got changed over to the Mayor's War reasonably recently, and I love the title, so we're sticking to it.
It's great. I'm just saying, like everybody else listening to this, it is also my first time hearing that information.
It was my first time tonight too, and I had to tell Ryan that Audible has different plans for the title of book 8. It is, if you look on Audible right now, it is called Jim the Curious Puppy.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That is my. So Jim the Curious Puppy is funny. I'll say that. Sorry. So I was doing April Fool's Day's jokes every year, and one year for April Fool's Day, we released Jim the Curious Puppy, which is the one of the jokes in Noobtown is that Jim is the name equivalent to Spot, and there's a series of books called Jim the Curious Puppy. So we released that book. It is a lit RPG book for children featuring a cute little puppy that my son Levi drew. And so we drew the whole thing. And I tried to convince Levi to do more of them, but he has been disinclined to repeat the process. I had an artist actually approach me about that, so that there might be more of those. I don't know. I doubt it, but it was fun. I liked writing children's books.
I would buy a children's book from the Noobtown series any day of the week. So I want to back up a little bit. There's a certain amount of relatability to narrators in lit RPG because they generally come from our world, right? They talk about things. They have, the way they talk and their references are often from popular culture. But I think Noobtown has more popular culture references than any book did I just answer this question before I ask the real question? Did I catch a Visionaries reference in one of the books?
I believe so, because I do remember watching The Visionaries a number of years ago. So.
Yes. All right.
So there is some very deep reservoirs of pop culture there. So understand, I love watching cartoons, and I watched every cartoon in the 80s and most of the 90s, and I never really stopped until I was in my late 30s watching pretty much everything. So I just like to consume large amounts of media, and as book one, I was like, that was funny, stick in more. So I stuck in more, and it just I keep sticking in as many references as I can fit into the story without it taking away from the story.
I've just never met anybody who's ever watched Vision. I had all the action figures as a kid, but there's Smurf references, there's He-Man references, there's Lord of the Rings, Disney. So I mean, I guess the question was, and you've answered a little bit of the question, Ryan, but Johnathan, this question goes for you too. Like, did you, in my book, I made a Star Trek: The Next Generation reference, and the narrator has to know the inflection, right? Especially if you're repeating a voice. Do you have to do research for any of these?
No, because I will crush any trivia night that you put me into. Again, I don't know that Podium knew that, but coincidentally, I am that dude. There is nothing that you can slide by me from a pop culture perspective that I will not smash out of the park. I know them all. So, my favorite, Ryan does something that's the deepest of deep cuts, which is he will put in references to TV series that I've been on. He has a whole paragraph in the last one, book 7, that veers from a series that I was the lead on and then dovetails into the movie that I wrote that came out a couple of years ago in theaters. And so that's a joke for two people, right? That's for me and Ryan and maybe the handful of other people who've seen my movies or TV shows. And that's so those are always flattering and fun. But the other ones are usually in the pocket too. And I want to spoil something a little bit here. The book series that I have coming out is, as if anyone heard the previous podcast that we did, is about an author who gets transported, a wildly successful fantasy author who gets transported inside the world of his own books. This is not about that, so I will. And it is a creation of my own imagination and so forth. But there are homages to authors with whom I have relationships and the styles in which they write inside of the author that writes the books inside of the books that I'm writing about the author who writes books. So, in fact, I use that word homage deliberately because our author, his name is Bruce. Bruce, in the book series Meet Your Maker, insists that all of his pop culture references and so forth are really just homages, and it's not stealing if it's referential and reverential. And so I'm I'm not saying that is a tip of the hat to any one author that I know well. I'm just saying that that's also something that so like this. My point is the Funhouse mirrors run really deep in this little thing that we've got going here. So, but in answer to your original question, no, I'm pretty good about that, and usually also Ryan's very good about hanging a lantern on those things. Like you have to. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, you know it's something. You know what I mean? Just because you can feel it from a rhythmic standpoint and tonally. And so on the rare occasions when I might have a flyby, I'll double check it. But for the most part, if there's anime stuff, I'm not as conversant in that stuff. So any of the like deep manga or anime stuff, sometimes I'll have to look up. But otherwise, I'm pretty much on top of it.
Ryan, did you have anything? I kind of cut you off, I think. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, that hits about all of it. I try to have fun, and it seems to be something that everyone finds amusing. So if you tell me something's amusing, I'm going to keep hitting that thing as hard as I can.
Well, I think it's something that you do well, and I think it's something that the genre does well in general. But you really sort of knock it out of the park. All right, well, I'm going to move on to the next question here. You both have been in the game for a while. You've been in this lit RPG universe. I'm wondering how you think the genre has changed. And we could debate whether it's a genre or not. I'm going to assume for this question that it is. Could you tell us how you think the genre has changed in the last 5 or so years?
From my perspective, I think what's happened is it's broadened, first off. So there's a lot more of it. And because it's broadened, there's a lot more niches that are being filled out a little bit more effectively than when I started. Because when I started... there was a few lit RPG. I mean, there's not a few but there was, there wasn't, a Dungeon Crawler Carl, or there wasn't a He Who Fights with Monsters. It was pretty much the land and maybe Ascent Online, and then, my book, woohoo. But there just wasn't that big of a depth to it. And I think nowadays, if I wanted to read a book about a starship core that landed on a planet and turned itself into a dungeon, I legit believe I could find one of those with a very minimal amount of looking. So I think that's what you see there. I think the other big thing is, like, when I started writing, it was you see this early Noobtown as opposed to now. I was really detailed. I had a chapter discussion of Jim's power-ups, and I would go into real depth about how each of the power-ups affects him and what's going on. And I found later that more people are interested in how those powers affect the story rather than necessarily how he earns those powers or how he decides to take which power. Mm-hmm. So if you read like early books, Jim is sitting there and having these really long conversations with himself about if you should take dragon scales or, mana reduction or something like that. And the later books, Shart pretty much spends the whole time going, no, don't do that. Please, dum-dum. You're killing me here.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. So talking with Eric Ugeland here recently, he referred to this time that we're in as the gold rush of lit RPG. Eric's the one that we have often talked about whether lit RPG is in fact a genre or a label that you put on other genres. Johnathan, what do you think? How has the genre changed in the last 5 years?
I guess I would echo a lot of what Ryan said, and for better and for worse, there's a lot of it. To Ryan's point, what I've discovered is that there are people out there, like there's a readership who will say things like, hey, does anybody know if there's a book out there where the primary weapon is a scythe? You know what I mean? And it's like, probably, surely. Yeah, somebody's written that. So yeah, you can really find it. And I think, to Ryan's other point, and this is meaningful to me, both from the perspective of someone who, has written for a long time and who also has to read other people's writing, the focus on narrative and story, while in balance with some of the, I guess we'll call it crunchier aspects, feels like it's taking greater root. And I see that in the work that I do. And it makes for, I think, a richer, more dynamic reading and listening experience, to which end I think that undeniably you have to call it its own genre. I think it really has earned the right to be seen as such. I think it is one. I don't think that's disputable. So Ryan and I share a publisher. So Victoria, the publisher for Podium, who is terrific. We were having this conversation recently because I was debating with them about whether we should call my book series. It's a pentology. It's 5 books. It's very finite. It's very specific. There's a beginning, middle, and end. It's a 5-act play.
Mm-hmm.
And we were debating about whether or not to call it a lit RPG. And I was like, yes, there are lit RPG elements in it, but at the end of the day, like, it's something slightly different than that and whatever. And it was her thinking, and I think it's right, that, you know, it is foundationally that thing. And when all is said and done, you know, to Ryan's other point, there are now a diverse set of options out there. And so, like, you don't want to paint everything with the same brush, but by the same token, you definitely need to know, who you're marketing to and who your core audience is. And also there's a little bit of a dance with the one who brung you, pal. You know what I mean? And this is a really loyal enthusiast. I think Reddit, it's a top 2% of all the subreddits on Reddit, right? The lit RPG subreddit. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's growing at an exponential rate, I feel like. So yeah, all that's true. But I think that at some point, whether it's Dinneman, whether it's Deverell, whether it's Ryan Rimmel, whether it's whoever, somebody's going to cross over. It's going to get adapted. It's going to hit the zeitgeist, and then the world's going to find it, you know, and that is inevitable.
And it's happening, I think, you know?
Yeah, it is, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to move us along to kind of like we have some fun questions coming up here. This question is about Noobtown, because that is the series of yours that I'm immersed in. I wanted to know who your favorite characters are in Noobtown.
I love Jim. Yeah. I love Jim. Like, I love Jim. People, I think, identify with Jim. Like, Jim is one of the most sort of like foundationally recognizable. Like, everything that he experiences feels authentic to me. And also, I love, for all the fun it is to play the fun characters, I love the straight man. Like, I love him. I love just Jim. He feels absolutely in the pocket as a character. I love playing Jim. And I love that we get to view the world, except for the occasional chapter that's told from a different POV, from a third person, when Ryan chooses that. You know, we get to, it's a monologue. It's Jim's narrative of his experience in this world. And I really, really love doing it. I guess if I had to pick one other one, so it's not like just a cop-out that the main character is my favorite, I love doing Zorlando. Zorlando's a lot of fun. Zorlando's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
I Zorlando, said Zorlando. That's the first line of Zorlando in every book is I Zorlando said Zorlando.
Yeah. And I will emphasize too that I'm not just like out here freewheeling. Like, Ryan has been very good with every time a new installment comes out and new characters are introduced. I get a sheet with encouragement or direction or what was in his head and his ears when he was writing it. So I try to honor what it is that Ryan, you know, sets up for me to do.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And my favorite is also, my favorite character generally is just Jim, because he is really, like, your first main character of any book is self-referential character. I don't have to think too hard for whatever Jim would do, because Jim is just me in a lit RPG world. A little bit more sarcastic than I am generally, but I'm thinking it at least. My favorite character, though, to write for is probably Sir Dalton, because I love the fact he's just fun. He started off as a very bad parody of a certain Disney character, which is really, really obvious. But he has kind of migrated into this really good, positive male vibe, bro energy thing that I just love. And I also love the fact that he individually talks to his body parts, and that's how he operates his life.
Oh, yeah. It seemed like at first I wasn't sure if Sir Dalton was going to be like a bad guy. And then he became BFFs with Jim. And then in book 7, there's a backstory. You get the backstory, and it is actually like really touching.
Yeah. I'm good for tragic backstories. I don't think there's a character in any of my series that doesn't have a very tragic backstory.
Oh, this one is very tragic. All right. So this question was meant to set us up for the next question, and this is the game portion. So if we were on a dating game, that's what this game would be. We are not on a dating game. And so really these are going to be questions about characters from Noobtown. You've given me your answers ahead of time, and I'm going to have you just say your answers after I read the question. And we're going to see if you both have answered sort of the same character. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Question 1, who is the character in Noobtown that is the most likely to headbutt another character?
Well, I did terribly in all these answers, but I said Jim. Jim would be the one who would most likely do it because he has the most opportunities to do it. But I also stuck in Glorious Robert. It's an important part of his culture, a foundational part of his culture, and he does a lot of background headbutting that you don't see.
That's right.
Yeah. I wrote, quote, Glorious Robert, hands down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, didn't Jim get trained by Glorious Robert?
Of course he did.
Yeah,
it's called a Basstown headbutt. That's where he's from.
That's right, exactly. So that question, I started off with an easy one. Okay, question 2: who is the character in Noobtown that is the most likely to, and I did this on purpose, quote unquote, flirt with another character?
My response was, if you mean quote unquote flirt, it's Otto Sherman. If you mean actually flirt, it's Hansa. What did you have, Jonathan?
Otto Sherman, Stone Cold Freak.
Yeah, Stone Cold Freak. Yeah.
He is, yeah. That one was also kind of a gimme. All right, question 3. Who is the character in Noobtown that is most likely to crack a joke at the worst possible moment?
I had Fenris.
Oh, that's interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I had Shart.
And that also works.
Yeah.
I think Fenris... whenever I have like not like a bad inappropriate joke, like when Zombie Grandma happened, or I've got another thing for him in book 8 where he just is like, man, he just points out a situation and just doesn't handle it well. So in my mind, that's the one who does it because Shart's jokes are funny.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but they are, but they're. I just feel like because Shart is always looking to make the joke. So I was like, whenever, inappropriate, appropriate, doesn't matter to him. He'll do it whenever.
All right, let's see here. Number 4 is, who is the character in Noobtown that is most likely to volunteer for a dangerous quest?
Jim?
Yeah.
This
is where I went with Fenris.
Ah.
Yeah.
Fenris totally would. I actually had Jim and Bachelor would fight for it because Bachelor would just do it. I don't know he'd volunteer. Bachelor would be like, unless you guys can't do this proper, so I'll go do it myself. And then wander off and do it.
Yeah. So question 5, who is the character in Noobtown that is most likely to make a Scooby-Doo reference? And I think one of you had, Ryan, you had given a different answer than I expected.
Oh, I see what you're going for. Yeah. Jim could make a Scooby-Doo reference. Bachelor always makes Scooby-Doo references when he's talking because when he's talking in regular language, he's ruh-roh everybody.
Yeah.
We've got to save the world, in a good Scooby-Doo voice. But I suppose that would probably be Toman.
Yeah,
that was what I said because this is one of those. If you hear me doing like a terrible Casey Kasem Shaggy impression, it's not because I was like, "Oh, that seems funny." It's because I got the notes for the book in which Toman appears, and it's like, "This is what you are to do, Jonathan.
Yes,
do your best fucking Shaggy impression."
Yeah.
All right, number 6 here. Who is the character in Noobtown that is the most likely to take a monster as a pet?
That'd be the Dalton girls. Depending on which one, I would personally say Rose because I've read book 8.
I actually said Bachelor. I was like, I'm going to give Bachelor his own opportunity to have a pet of his own, and he would take on a pet monster.
He does have that. He is kind of a softie, in some way, especially for kids, right?
Yeah. He loves little kids. He is their version of Santa.
Oh, right.
That is still mentioned every time.
Which book is that prologue in?
That would be, let's see your book.
Is it 4?
4? Yeah, I think it's 4.
Yeah, I think so.
Not 5. I think it's 4, yeah.
Because 5's Noob Game Plus, right?
Yeah. Yeah, God, my wife and I we were driving somewhere, and we came up with that whole prologue in the car. I was writing it was written on my phone. I didn't even have my tablet with me, so I didn't have a keyboard. And we went through that thing like 50 times, and then I posted it, or then I printed it, and then I'm like, oh, it still sucks, and we went through it about 10 more.
I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one who tries to get my wife to work in the car when we're driving somewhere. Question 7. Who is the character in Noobtown that is most likely to cook a meal without poisoning anyone?
Esther Shasha.
Yeah. That's what I thought you would. Yeah, that's what I thought you guys would say. What did you say, Jonathan?
I said Hansa. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a soft spot for Hansa. I just like the idea of her as a character. So
She is adorable.
yeah,
Literally described as adorable, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Weaponized cuteness.
Yeah, wow, which is such a great. God, that's such a great descriptor. I love that. Weaponized cuteness. That's strong. That's strong.
All right. Question 8 here. Who is the character in Noobtown that is most likely to charm? And I didn't put it in quotes, but you're welcome to answer this in quotes, Ryan. A male character.
Bashara would be my guess.
Yeah.
I put also Otto Sherman.
Yeah. That's,
Technically, I wrote the answer as Bashara by design, Hansa by accident. She flirts with everybody, and Otto Sherman if he's lucky. Stone cold freak. He does not care.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. All right. Question 9. Who is the character in Noobtown that is most likely to have multiple personalities?
Sir Dalton. Every single part of him has its own personality.
This is the greatest answer. Yeah, go ahead,
I wrote Johnathan McClain.
Oh, that's the best answer.
So
We
That
should
is
end
good.
there. But I'm going to do one more.
okay.
All right. Who is the character in Noobtown that is most likely to try to get away from her offspring? Another gimme.
That's Beatrix.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I answered too.
yeah, Beatrix. While Jim's sitting there going, "Why is she leaving? She loves these kids. That
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me."
Oh, everybody thinks she loves those kids. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she's a progenitor. There's just boundless amounts of love and respect for her, except for anyone who deals with her point blank solo for any period of time.
That's actually a character I really enjoy doing too, because that wasn't one that I got any sort of like do this or don't do this. It was like, here's the character. She's a bird. Figure it the fuck out. And so I was like, here we go. And it's super. I mean, it's vocal warm up necessary. Lots and lots of articulators and hot tea getting going. But she's a lot of fun to do. That's a lot of fun.
So you wrote a bunch of those progenitors into book 8, right, Ryan? For Johnathan.
Oh no, I have a For Johnathan chapter in book 8.
Do you really?
Yes.
All right, great.
Because
Awesome.
my narrator called me out, so I had to come up with one, and it's. I think it's so good.
I can't wait? Question mark.
You super can, because it's going to be terrible.
Okay, great. I mean, well, that was the thing, right? Like they asked me, the publisher asked me to put in some bloopers for a couple of the books, and that was one of them. And that was real. I mean, I think I curse your name at the end of that chapter. Because
you totally did.
for anyone who isn't clearly conscious of what we're talking about, I remember it's chapter 20 something of book whatever. I don't know why I remember the chapter number, but the chapter is titled For Johnathan, and it's just a bunch of tongue twisters in a variety of character voices. And Ryan, you'd asked me about like how long it takes to record a Noobtown book. Depends on how hard you make it on me. I mean, like that chapter took hours. And if I don't know how many hip hop fans there are listening, but if old school ones especially, but if everybody knows how Eazy-E originally recorded Boys in the Hood, which was he didn't know how to rap, and so Dr. Dre had to punch him in line by line. He would record a line, and he'd stop because he couldn't get the rhythm right, and Dr. Dre would punch in another line and punch in another line and punch in another line. That was how I kind of had to cobble together. Like normally I can just flow between the characters and do the thing and the whatever. The tongue twisters and multiple voices it took like a day. It took like a whole day to do a chapter. So
You're welcome.
So thanks. Yeah. So thanks again in advance.
Yeah, this one I don't want to reveal too much because I want Johnathan to be properly tortured.
I appreciate your confidence in my abilities.
Oh no, I will say one line, which is basically something to the effect of, "Well, everyone here's, but that's really going to be hard to do." Well, hard for a normal person. Someone trained at Juilliard would do it amazingly well. I don't think they could do anything but their best, or they'd feel less of a man. At any rate.
By the way, I need to make sure I'm clear about something. You got that because at the end of one of the bloopers, that's in one of the books, I was like, "Oh, thanks, Juilliard," which, for those who don't know, is the most prestigious acting school in the country and whatever. And to be clear, I didn't go there.
Oh,
that's a joke.
That's even funnier.
That's my joke, because I was in theater in New York for so long, and all of my dear friends went to Juilliard and yada, 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 like the best actors I know. But it's always been my joke. I would come out of commercial auditions for like, Downey or whatever in New York. And I'd be like, and after I've held up a bottle and been like, it's so fresh. It smells like a meadow or whatever. And then come out and like go, thanks, Juilliard. And it was just a joke. And you picked it up and have run with it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Here we go. But I think for the sake of, clarity for anyone, just like the last time we talked, Jared, Seth mentioned, he was like, well, and you wrote a screenplay that was nominated for an Academy Award. I was like, no, I wrote a screenplay with an Academy Award-winning screenwriter. Mine was not. So similarly, but I do fortunately have like 20 or 30 years of Shakespeare training. So, and I don't get to put it to use that often. And so what I'm saying is Noobtown is my Shakespeare.
Well, as Seth said in the last interview, I would have just let it go. just let it go. People
just let the lie live.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's the internet. People get called out for all kinds of random reasons.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I have one more serious question, and that is, what is the one thing that people say about your work, both of you, that makes you feel good, and or, because maybe you don't want to answer this second part, what is the one criticism of your work that you've kind of taken to heart and you think about regularly?
The one thing that I really take to heart, one that I'm really happy about, is I occasionally get someone telling me that they're having a really bad time and they're really, really having a rough patch, and they've read my book and it's made them happy. And I like that. I like the fact that I can bring some small amount of joy into someone's life, even if they're having a rough patch. And that is what I'm doing these books for. The Noobtown series is designed to just be fun and entertaining, and I like it when people are entertained when they read it. Criticisms, I try to take care of the criticisms as well as I can. Some people have, my earlier books, I wasn't as proficient at writing, so there's some issues with those that I've largely corrected. But sometimes you have someone who, says, they don't get it, or they don't like what I'm writing. And so they think it's just a bad demonstration of the genre as a whole. And I'm like, it's not that bad, man. So, you just have to, you take the good with the bad. The problem with being a writer on the internet is, if you read the comment section about the negative reviews, you're going to stop being a writer on the internet, because they're all terrible. You're right.
But, I refer to my pastime of listening to Lit RPG as my brain candy.
I will say one thing. This is something for the new, anyone who wants to write an audio book, or excuse me, not write an audio book, write a book, or a Lit RPG, or any kind of book. Don't pay as much attention to the criticism as you do the people who like it, because they don't like your book in the first place, and they aren't going to read the next one. Because I spent a lot of time fixing problems that a very small number of people were actually complaining about, instead of concentrating on the parts that people did. Like I will use this as my favorite example, is I had a lot of complaints about dick and fart jokes. And I love dick and fart jokes. I have a whole chapter that's a fart joke in book 2. And so fart jokes are near and dear to my heart. What I'm getting at is I tried to moderate my fart jokes and cut them down a little bit to make the group of people that were anti-fart jokes happy. And in so doing, I upset the much larger group of people who rather enjoyed that kind of humor.
Yeah.
So don't try to appease to the people who hate your work in the first place. They're not going to love your work because you fixed something. Work on making the people who like it more.
It's good advice.
Yeah.
Johnathan?
You want to restrict this to just the narrator stuff, because God knows, over the years, I was on TV. I was in people's living rooms, every week for a few years on this show, and the kind of both praise and abuse that I've gotten is sort of, I've been forged in the fires, right? So,
yeah.
I guess okay. Relative to Lit RPG and narration specifically, for whatever reason, and this last year or so has been a deluge of opportunity in the genre, and I've done more and more, and more and more is coming out. And there's something I admire people who've been at this game for a while and are exceptional at it. Jeff Hayes is extraordinary. Travis Baldry is extraordinary. I don't possess the same skill set, but I find my name, and I get tagged in these things, so I see them, because you also can't escape the internet if people are going to choose to call your attention to it. so it's very flattering to be included in those names, right, as someone that people respond to. And I will be unabashed about saying that, yes, comparison is the thief of joy and all of that, unless you're being compared to people you admire, in which case, fuck it, it's awesome. So that's the thing. As far as the criticisms go, they are legion. Like people who hate the fact that I do voices, or they don't think I do enough voices, or I swear to God, I have somewhere saved a screenshot of 2 Audible reviews back to back. One is, and I mean this, swear to God, it's the same day, and one is like this. It might have been on one of the Noobtown books, but this is one of the best narrations I've ever heard. I've never laughed so hard. It's so fucking good. Oh my God, I love it. Everybody listens. But the very next one is like droning math teacher. Couldn't they have found somebody good or even gotten an AI? My God, this is the worst thing I've ever heard, like back to back. And I'm like, that's it right there. Everything Ryan just said, like, that's the game. Don't take any of it too much to heart. Don't try and cater to, it's funny, my series, my book's coming out, Meet Your Maker, which I keep plugging unabashedly, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm not doing it deliberately. But it's just because it dovetails into some of what we're talking about, is really, to some degree, an exploration and a rumination on who we make art for, and where we're accountable. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit in the sense that, like, it doesn't affect me. Obviously, I would prefer you have a pleasant experience listening to me than not. But I don't give a shit for me. I give a shit for you. It does bum me out. It really does. But not because it makes me feel, sad, or I keep my own counsel. I know who I am. I'm fine with that. It makes me sad that you didn't have a good experience engaging with the work that I gave you. So like Ryan was saying, that's not your audience. So don't try and appeal to them. You have to serve the voice that is in you, the muse, the vessel, the whatever it is. And the people who are destined to find and engage with and enjoy that thing will. And the others, wish them well and hope that they have a better experience the next time around. And I will say one last thing. If you see a negative review, any author or narrator or anybody out there, if you see a negative review, I swear to God, click on if the profile has a click thing, click on it. 9 times out of 10, you will see a whole passel of things that they just hate. Mm-hmm. 9 times out of 10, the people who go out of their way to talk about how much they hate something hate a lot of things. Like that's not about you, right? That's about their ability to experience a thing. And so, I don't know, that's a little existential, but I feel like it matters because what Ryan brought it to, I think, is really the core, which is like anybody who's going to endeavor into the art of creation just needs to listen to the authenticity of their own voice. Because I think when you start trying to write to market, man, you're in a real danger zone because you stop making the thing that you care about.
Oh, speaking of bad reviews, this one's fun. I have one guy who's given me a 1-star review on all 7 books. Oh. He bought them all and read them all and then gave a 1-star review on every one of them.
See what I mean? Like, I feel bad for that guy. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel bad. Like, well, bro. Well, then also, bro, like, you should examine why you want to punish yourself. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Thanks for continuing to read my stuff.
Yeah, thanks for lining my pockets while making yourself sad. Jiminy Christmas. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I was prepared for a mic drop after that response from Johnathan. So that's it. That wrapped up the podcast.
Well, as Eddie Izzard used to say, I always like to end all of my things on a feeling of, and I think we've achieved that here. So.
Well, I do want to ask, like, what do you guys have going on, and where can we find you online?
Oh, let's see here. Well, I've got Yorick and the Sword of Justice, or Sword of Justice is coming out soon. That's one of my new books. I'm working on the second one of that one right now. When that one's done, I'm pushing over to another 5th Era Apocalypse book, and Noobtown 8 should be out around October. It is done and is in editing. So I got a big pile of stuff that was kind of delayed from my life events this year. Yeah, Noobtown 8 is you can see it on my Patreon right now, and that's where I am. If you want to find me on the internet, I am on Patreon, and have chapters of the book up so you can go and read the whole book. And the For Johnathan chapter got rave reviews because they think it's going to be hilarious listening to Johnathan try to do that one.
Gee, is this you convincing me to spend money to become your patron?
I'm just saying. If you want to see what punishment is going to look like, there it is.
Right.
All right. What about you, Johnathan?
Well, have I mentioned that I have a book series coming out?
You have a book? Yeah.
Yeah. Let me tell you about it. It's called Meet Your Maker. Volume 1 publishes audio online and in bookstores. We'll be in physical copy in bookstores on October 15th. We have a website. It's meetyourmaker.world. And you can go to my website and find me and all of my links there. And that's JonathanMcClain.com. That's we'll spell it JonathanMcClain.com. And then from a narration standpoint, I mean, I've got a ton of stuff coming out. Just a ton of stuff. If you go to Audible and Google, put my name in Audible, and do releases new to old, you'll see all the pre-orders for all the stuff. I mean, I'm really grateful and really fortunate that I have a bunch of cool stuff coming out, and apparently a new Noobtown book to get into, which I'm very excited about.
Well, guys, thank you for your work, and thank you for coming on the podcast tonight. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us down this Lit RPG deep dive. Please consider giving us a review on Apple Podcasts and visit us over at longwinded.one, where you can see past episodes and find all of our socials, even our new Discord server. We hope you enjoy.